Welcome to the latest episode of the Federal's Worldly Wise, a weekly video program that attempts to examine in depth trending international issues. Since 2021, India's northeastern neighbor Myanmar has been convulsed by an intensely fought insurgency. Pro-democratic groups have been fighting the ruling military junta after emergency was imposed 4 years ago. The fighting, besides the internal turmoil within Myanmar, has a direct impact on India as both nations share a 1,600-kilometer border. To understand what's happening in Myanmar, the status of the insurgency, and the implications for India, we have with us senior journalist Subir Bhaumik, who has for decades covered Myanmar for various international media organizations, including the BBC. Subir, among his other India-related media activities, is a contributor for the Federal. Welcome, Subir.
Thank you.
What is the status of the of the insurgency, Subir? Is there any progress in the military junta's proposal for an election?
Well, this election is a bit of a joke in the sense that the military junta has lost control over at least 50%, half the national territory. And if control over territory is a hallmark of any regime's control of power, then the Myanmar junta is in serious trouble. Since February 2021, when it went in for a coup and did not allow the Aung San Suu Kyi government to take charge, things have really deteriorated. Now here, let me make it clear. There are multiple groups which are fighting the Burmese military junta with the force of arms. Now, some of these groups have always fought the Burmese military for decades now. And these are ethnic rebel groups, like the Kachin Independence Army, the current groups, the Shan groups, belatedly the Arakan Army, whose predecessor organization, NUPA, was, also fought the Burmese military junta. Now, these are ethnic groups which want separation of their units. Their unit, I mean, states where those nationalities are preponderant. They're non-Burmese or non-Burman. Like the Kachins, the Karens, the Shans, the Arakanis. So they want their own acre of green grass. They want separation. They want secession. And they have fought. Now, some would say that maybe secession is the high point demand. They may reconcile if Myanmar were to go in for an authentic federation and give a lot of powers to the states. The states can be emboldened. So to exercise much more powers than they do at the moment. So this is one group of people who have been fighting the military junta. Belatedly, you have many Burman groups who earlier would try to fight against the military junta for restoration of democracy. Now, they had traditionally taken to the streets and gone for street protests and that kind of movement, peaceful protests, mass mobilization driven. But after the coup and the brutal suppression of these, pro-democracy movements, many of these people have turned to arms. And they have formed an organization called PDFs, People Defense Forces. Now, many of these groups are aligned to what we know as the parallel government in Myanmar, created by, lawmakers of various parties, especially Aung San Suu Kyi's NLD party, who were not allowed to take power after the elections in 2021. So these PDFs have gained strength, and more importantly, they have aligned themselves with many of the rebel groups. Now, these PDFs are region-driven again. So you have PDF Sagaing, you have PDF in various states, and wherever they are, they have aligned with the important ethnic rebel group in that particular area. This has led to a congregation of, various militant groups, armed groups, and which are ethnic rebel groups, as well as these Burman traditionally pro-democracy groups, but now they have taken to arms. And there is a third group also, a third type of here. They're small in numbers, like the Rohingyas.
Mhm.
These are refugees, these are population people who've driven out of Myanmar by Burmese ethnic cleansing, Burmese military driven ethnic cleansing. And they have formed their own armed groups. They are operating from neighboring countries like Bangladesh. Uh,
So,
so,
yeah. No, no. So about the elections itself, so which means it doesn't have credibility. I mean, what is the reason for it not?
no, no, very simply, Dakshin, these Burmese military junta, these rebel groups have said they will not allow the elections to take place until and unless there is a return to democracy. And elections cannot happen under military rule. This is what they have clearly said. Point is, the military would have organized these elections, but they don't control territory. Now, how do they hold elections in areas they don't control? Therefore, I would imagine that the Burmese, military junta, they will hold elections wherever they can and pass it off as a legitimate exercise and put the blame on the other rebel groups that they did not allow the elections to happen. Now, this is aimed at basically the international audience that look here, we are being blamed for finishing democracy. Here, we wanted to hold an election, and these elections could not happen for the very simple reason that these are armed groups. They are the troublemakers, they are the insurgents, they are the anti-national elements. They did not allow the elections to happen. So this
Yeah.
is the prime target of the Burmese military junta. So if the elections don't happen, that does not, affect them, because they can continue in power in some form or the other. If
Yeah.
the elections happen, then of course their rule gets legitimized, and they will put in place somebody who they can manage.
Right. So, what is India's position on this insurgency that is happening there?
Well, India, to be very frank, has done very little to play a role in conflict mediation. India had an opportunity because India is one of the very few countries who have access to the different stakeholders in the Burmese Sea, in the Myanmar, milieu, in the Myanmar scenario. Our military has military to military relation with the Burmese military, which means we have a connect to the junta. Traditionally, for various different reasons, we have links with the Burmese pro-democracy groups, and we also have relation with some of the ethnic rebel groups like the Kachins and the Arakan. So India is one of the very few, countries who
Hmm.
had connections with the different stakeholders in the Burmese Sea. But as Foreign Minister Jaishankar made it very clear, we are going to adopt a wait and watch policy, and we are going to leave this entire conflict mediation exercise, the whole business of trying to bring down temperature, trying to bring down, bring back peace in Myanmar, to the ASEAN. The ASEAN, as you know, had declared a 5-point consensus program. See, the government of India thought that ASEAN will play the role with their 5-point consensus and will help in conflict mediation, but that didn't work. ASEAN's effort so far has completely failed, and they have hardly made any headway, despite the fact that Myanmar is one of the member countries of the ASEAN. And this did not work. Even the ASEAN took the extreme step trying to push through their conflict mediation. They said, if this does not work out, we'll not allow Myanmar, and especially the military supremo, General Min Aung Hlaing, to be invited to ASEAN conferences and stuff like that. But this does not work.
Hmm.
In this vacuum, the Chinese have entered in a very big way. Now, China has made it very clear that it is seeking to, save the military junta from what looks like a free fall. And therefore, what the Chinese have done is they have intervened in a way that some of the rebel groups, like the MNDDA and the Tang National Liberation Army, TNLA, up in the north, close to the China border, they have been forced. they have been forced to hand over some of the important areas that they had captured from the Burmese military. Now, here, Chinese intelligence has played a very direct role, a role which I can safely say, which verges on arm twisting, that they have first got these rebel groups to sit on the table, which they were not willing to initially, with the military government, military junta. Secondly, they have pushed them to actually hand back territory which they had gained, especially the town of Lasio up in the northeast of Myanmar, close to the China border, which headquartered the Burmese Northeastern Military Command, and where the the Burmese
Yeah.
military had lost control. They had lost control last year. Now that town and the military command area has been now handed back to the Burmese military junta under tremendous pressure from the Chinese, which the MNDDA and the TNLA could not resist. They're making similar efforts elsewhere in the country. The Chinese are also, to defend their own military, to defend their
Economic.
own industrial investments, their corporate investments. They have mobilized their own security guards.
Mm.
There was a bill which was passed by the military junta of Myanmar in February this year, which allowed the Chinese to deploy their own security personnel to guard their own, establishments, which something like which they have what they have in Pakistan. So here they deployed their people, and the latest news from the Rakhine province is where Arakan army is involved in a fierce battle with the Burmese military junta over control of the port town of Chokpyu. Chokpyu is built with Chinese funds, and they have a Chinese special economic zone in addition to a Chinese built refinery where crude oil is brought, refined, and then sent up to Yunnan province of China through a pipeline. All this has been done. All this has been done, with the complete connivance of the Chinese. And here there are reports that the Chinese security people are actually assisting the Burmese military in flying drones and stuff like that. Now, when somebody is, helping somebody flying drones, they're combat technicians. They're not ordinary security guards, which means that under some cover, military people serving or retired military people who are capable of fighting, capable of combat, have been deployed there by China. So Chinese intervention in Myanmar is very real. They are there. They are there with a particular purpose. They are not there to solve the conflict in Myanmar. They are there to shore up and boost the Myanmar military junta and save it from free fall.
Well, what about India's interest in Myanmar? I mean, is it being taken care of, or is it up in the air? This
Well,
Aladdin project.
Indian, as you know, the Chinese are there to take care of their own interests, and it will be too much of them to expect, too much for us to expect that they will take care of our interests. The Indian interest, well, we have a couple of major connectivity projects. India's concern in Myanmar are twofold. One is connectivity, one is security. This whole Look East policy, which Mr. Modi made it act east, through from Northeast, the idea was that through Myanmar, it will connect to the tiger economies of Southeast Asia. To actually, this whole purpose of this Act East policy was to situate the underdeveloped northeastern region of India at the heart of our engagement with our neighbors of Southeast Asia, some of whom are economic tigers. But if Myanmar does not work, if Myanmar descends into civil war as it already has, these projects are way beyond time, and it's going to be extremely difficult. I'll mention two projects here. One is the trilateral Golden Highway that is supposed to go from Manipur state of India up to Mysore in Thailand through Myanmar. This trilateral because there are three countries involved: India, Myanmar, and Thailand. This project is not going anywhere, and it's impossible for contractors to work on this Indian project. A, because they don't feel safe to do it there. B, they find it very difficult to bring in their material. And C, they have to deal now with multiple stakeholders. They have to deal in some areas, because the control is with the Myanmar army, in some areas where it is with rebel groups, and not one, but many rebel groups. So it's extremely difficult to implement this golden trilateral highway project. The other is the Kaladan multimodal project, which is multimodal because it's supposed to connect Calcutta to Sitwe port in Rakhine province by sea, then go up the river, Kaladan River, to up to Paletwa, and then from Paletwa to Zorinpui in Mizoram by road. Now, the shipping minister of India, Sarvananda Sonowal, recently said that we can implement this project by next year. I don't know how, because Rakhine province, Sitwe port, is controlled by the Burmese military. 14 out of the 17 townships in Rakhine province is now controlled by the Arakan army. Only 3 of the towns, like Chokpio and Sitwe and Manaung, they are controlled by the Burmese military.
Mhm.
And large parts of the remaining stretch, the river stretch and the road stretch, are controlled by rebel groups. Paletwa has fallen into the hands of the Arakan army, which is an important river road junction. Rest of the area, Chin groups are very active in these areas. So I don't know how India will be able to operationalize this project. A, because there are multiple groups are in control of different stretches of this whole project. C, it depends on some of these groups and their attitude to India. If they think, here the trouble, Dakshin, is if India is seen as close to the Myanmar military junta, the rebel groups may say, we will not allow this project to go ahead.
Yeah.
If it's otherwise, if the Myanmar military junta thinks that India is playing ball with some of these rebel groups, they may say, well, we are not going to operationalize the project. Maybe they will not say it directly, but they will find ways to delay the whole thing. Moreover, they have their own backs to the wall. So, I really don't see how these projects can be operationalized. This is the connectivity part of it. Security wise, well, many of these rebel groups which are fighting against the Burmese military junta have relation with their ethnic cousins in northeast India.
Yeah, in
Like,
fact, I wanted to ask you that, the consequences of this on the Northeast, on India's Northeast, and, what's happening there.
so the thing is that some of these rebel groups, like the Kuki rebel groups in, Manipur, were active in Manipur. They recently used drones in their fight against the Meiteis in Manipur. And these drones, I'm quite sure they have got it because they're based in Myanmar. They've got it from some of the friendly Myanmar groups, because in Myanmar, drones have been heavily used not only by the Burmese military but by also these rebel groups. In fact, some of these rebel groups launched a full-fledged drone attack on the capital, Naypyidaw, earlier in the year. And they hit locations very close to the residence of the military supremo, General Min Aung Hlaing. So, these drones have come here. So this is very dangerous. That some of the Myanmar rebel groups have historical relationships with Indian northeastern rebel groups. The Kachins have a long history of training. The Naga rebel groups, the various other northeastern rebel groups like the Alpha, and it's anybody's guess what's going to happen in this kind of muddle, in this kind of a complete chaotic situation. It's quite likely that some of these rebel groups may find a new lease of life, because they may be getting fresh sources of weapons from which are flowing into Myanmar from different sources at the moment.
Mm.
So this is really a major security issue for India, which the government of India has to address in a meaningful way. Just saying that we'll wait and watch. Well, as far as I'm concerned, I think wait and watch is the other way of expressing strategic inaction. I don't think this helps. India has to play some proactive role, which
Yeah.
belatedly they've tried to connect to some of these rebel groups for practical reasons, but in a more meaningful way. I think, we have missed the bus, because earlier into this conflict, when the conflict was escalating, we had a chance of, sending a peace mission, trying to bring the different stakeholders together. We could have played a role, but I think we said wait and watch, and we missed that chance.
Now, but Subir, now that there is this new found bonhomie between India and China, with also Modi going to, China for the SEO summit, You think this can be leveraged in Myanmar, to have some kind of a combined, effort to end the conflict, you think, or you think it's too far-fetched?
There is a great risk for India to align with China in Myanmar. The reason is, the Chinese have totally put their egg in one basket as far as Myanmar is concerned. They're backing the military junta. All the other rebel groups, many of whom are very powerful, they may not be, they may not like the fact that the Indians have not really played any role. India has not done much, but they are at least not openly hostile to us for the very simple reason that we have not gone and jumped in to the fray, siding with
Yeah.
the Burmese military. We did supply weapons to the Burmese military, and that went on. But, not to the extent that the Chinese did. Now, if we are seen as aligned with China, we instantly lose trust of not only all the pro democracy forces, the various democratic political parties like Aung San Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy, we also lose trust of the various ethnic rebel groups, some of whom are very active on our borders. And
Mhm.
that will have its own implications, long term implications for India. So, and what do we gain by going along with China? Because China in Myanmar would like to get its own point of view through, which means saving the Burmese military junta, holding some kind of an election which will legitimize the Burmese military junta rather than bring back democracy and federal democracy, which is what most of these people want. So, if that is the way the Chinese look at it, we are certainly not in a position to go with them completely for the very simple reason: A, we lose people who have been friendly to us, historically in Myanmar. B, we really don't gain very much because, the Burmese military junta, if we, along with China, back them, they will be beholden to China rather
Yeah.
than to India for very obvious reasons. They are
Yeah.
already in China's lap. Now, this was a theory which I have heard in Delhi, that we don't want to push the Burmese junta very hard because they will go into China's pocket. They're already in China's pocket
Pocket.
for a very long time. So, there are great risks. India actually should be seen as a genuinely neutral and, player which is trying to bring back peace in
Mm.
Myanmar and which is trying to address the long standing aspirations of the Myanmar people of
Correct.
all hue in Myanmar. Short
Mm.
of that, if we try to do what the Chinese are doing, jump into the military junta's bandwagon, lock, stock, and barrel, as a functioning democracy, China does not have that hang up of being a democracy or anything. It's not a democracy. We
Right.
we will then, as we say in Bengali, lose both the mango and the sack.
Mm. Okay. So, now looking at the situation in Myanmar, the complexity. So, you think it's in for a long haul? I mean, the turmoil that you see, I mean, doesn't seem like it's heading anywhere towards a resolution.
Yeah, that's what it looks like at the moment because belatedly, last 2 months, due to heavy-handed Chinese intervention of different nature, somewhere
Yeah.
they put their own people, somewhere, they've arm twisted the rebels to, hand back territory which they had gained.
Yeah.
Somewhere, there is a bit of a thaw, there is a bit of a stalemate. I mean, at the rate the Burmese military junta were losing territory to the various armed rebel groups, now that seems to have stopped for a while. The situation is far from stabilized, the conflict is ongoing. I mean, here and there, the Burmese military has regained some place like a gold mine near Mandalay. But, large parts of territory still continues to remain under the grip of
Okay.
the
Okay.
rebel groups. And therefore, it looks like a civil war which is ongoing with no end in sight, no real mediation that we see. Neither the United Nations nor any major power has taken a direct role. The Chinese are there, but the Chinese are not bringing the different rebel groups to the table. They are backing the military junta. So there
Yeah.
is no real effort to,
Mm.
kind of bring the different stakeholders to the table and resolve the issue.
Okay. So that's really a grim assessment, and uh, thank you so much for your insights, Subir.
Thanks.